So when you guys open up the room, you can just let everyone know, hey, send your questions to Rachel. But sometimes they will just send them to whoever they can first. So just so you have an eye on that.
Perfect.
And that's for the most part it. I typically recommend also for you guys to give the room about 2 or 3 minutes before starting the conversation. That way people can actually access the room and join you guys so that they're not missing much. And at the end, of course, sharing what the people can connect with you, how they can find you, and so on. I did add your LinkedIn profile on the event description, but if you want me to change it to do something else, I can do that as well.
Perfect. Sounds good so far.
Oh, okay, perfect. Okay, great. So, the room is opening up. I will switch myself to be a listener, and if you guys need anything, just let me know.
Thanks, Valentina.
All right, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining. We are excited to be here. We're going to give it another minute and let people join in. Ah, yeah. All right, Tuesday. We are doing it. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Welcome everybody. Thank you for joining. So we are excited to be here. And I'll just kick it off. So thank you all for joining. My name is Rachel Serwetz. I am the founder and CEO and career coach at Woken. We are back on Fishbowl. We've been here time and time again. We are veterans here, so we're excited to chat on Fishbowl. And if you want to be notified of future conversations, feel free to just click on my profile and follow that way. So we are here today with a chat as part of a series called Navigating the Workplace. And we really just pull back the curtain on important topics to help you all as professionals to strategically navigate your career. So today we are going to talk about how to grow and advance, even if you're not like in the job search mindset. And even if you are in the job search mindset, it will help. But this is kind of like, what should you be thinking about in the course of the year, just for advancement at large, and also a little bit of that internally. So when you're on the job, how do you grow? How do you advance? How do you think about promotions? And then what else should you be thinking about throughout the year, even if you're not just in that narrow job search mindset? So we've got a lot of great questions, and I've got Tara here that we're going to interview and learn from her experiences to see how you can all sort of, take that forward for yourself. So we're going to have an interview for about like 40 or so minutes, and then we're going to open it up to audience Q&A. For that, you can either raise your hand and we can bring you onto the stage. So there's a button in the bottom right for that, and just enable your microphone. Or you can direct message me and I will keep your name anonymous. So I will very quickly introduce myself, and then Tara, we will have you do the same. Um, so my background, I started out, I was at Goldman Sachs, and then I went to Bridgewater Associates. I was in operations and then HR and performance management and recruiting. From there, I got trained and certified as a coach through NYU and the International Coach Federation. And for about 6.5 years now, I've been actually building my own company, and we career coach all different types of professionals in all different types of career goals and challenges. And I also did a tech MBA at NYU Stern. So that is the very quick background on me. Tara, please tell us who you are, and then we are going to dive into all the great questions.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. And hey, everybody. It's so hard to summarize your entire life in 10 seconds, but awesome. So I'm a people and HR leader, and I focus mainly on tech startups, and I am in the San Francisco Bay Area. So shout out if there's any other folks there in the Bay Area. But I actually found HR in a very backward way. I started out in retail, and I love retail. I'm one of those people who actually enjoys customer service, and I love solving problems and building those relationships with customers. And I realized retail was not a long-term play for me, so I ended up finding HR, partially because it's the same foundations, right? You're solving problems, you're working with people, building relationships. And in startups, you really have a huge input. So you're growing companies and you have a lot of power, frankly, and you can do and shape a company how you see fit and what your philosophy is. Work with founders. It's very exciting. But
I
I've
love it.
done, yeah, I've done 3 startups now in the Bay Area. 2 unfortunately ran out of money. So those didn't quite work, but the third one is still going today. It's a Series C startup focusing on software in the Palo Alto area. And as of literally 3 days ago, I have a new offer letter. I'm going to be joining a new company in 2 weeks. So name and title TBD, but it's a Series E startup in the Palo Alto area as well.
Amazing, amazing. So much amazing HR experience that we are going to learn from. So, the first thing I want to, just dive into is kind of how I'm going to frame this conversation. So, if you're not actively job searching, when you think about career growth, I kind of break it down in 2 ways. So, like, one is advancing in your role. So, you might get a promotion, you might get greater responsibilities, you might, change up which responsibilities you're in charge of, and you're advancing what it is you're doing within the company. And then there's how do you actually think about advancing your career outside of your day-to-day job, right? So sometimes just separating the current role from who you are as a professional at large, and you think about upskilling and your personal branding and your networking and all the things that may not have anything to do with your current role, but it's a way for you to think about your growth and your advancement, right? So that's kind of just the way I'm going to frame this, right? But the first section that we're going to sort of dive into is a little bit of the promotion piece. When you are on the job, how do you actually just get that next level versus sitting around hoping, wishing, waiting that somebody hands it to you, right? So the first thing I like to think about is, do you even know where you want to go? So yeah, Tara, like tell me a little bit about your thoughts of, have you met with professionals where they're not even sure if they want to be promoted, and they're trying to deal with where do I want to be in this organization? Like, how do you help somebody think through, what kind of growth they even want in the organization, right? Because you first want to get super crystal clear on what your goal is, and then of course we could figure out how to achieve it. But what are the different, ways that somebody might think about their place in the org, their growth in the org, and like essentially what's next for them?
Yeah, and I've seen this a lot. And just a quick note that I come from the tech startup lens. So, in a very literal sense, there's no structure. So, a lot of folks join a company or join a startup and they say, "Oh, I'm joining at X level and I'd like to get promoted, but I actually have no idea what it takes or what there is." So, from that perspective, it's really about no one's going to hand it to you. I also want to mention that no one is going to hand you a promotion. Nobody, frankly, knows who you are unless you promote yourself. So you really need to be confident in what you are, your skills are, what you're looking for, and how do you get there, right? So, in a very literal sense, make a list, write it down. What do you feel your strengths and your passions are? What motivates you? What excites you to wake up in the morning and go to work? And once you kind of have a few ideas jotted down, you need to go and be proactive there. So proactive is the key. No one's going to hand this to you. Just learn how how can you best uh, position yourself for future forward thinking. So one example would be go to your manager if you have a manager. Again, startup life, sometimes you don't even have a manager, but go to whoever you're reporting to and make it clear and say, "Hey, I really am excited about this company. I'm excited about my current role, but I'm also trying to improve myself. I would love to know a list of managers who doesn't want employees that aren't improving themselves or aren't excited to move forward." So just go with your manager, understand the expectations of what your current role is, understand what the next role is, and just kind of lay that framework and just be very verbal about it. You don't need to be like, super aggressive and letting everyone in the whole company know what you want, but just be honest and communicative with your manager.
Yeah, and I think the key too is just like getting to know with yourself first. What do you want? And then of
Yeah.
course you can communicate that. But I was actually just chatting with somebody who their company was going through a lot of restructuring, and this woman had an opportunity to like figure out where she belonged in the firm. And so for yet another reason, not that we need more reasons, but knowing yourself, your strengths, and networking across the organization, and documenting these things like is so important to be proactive, because you never know when your company's just gonna like go up and change so much. And then if you're like this woman was being tasked to like find her own new place in the organization and like draft her own job description. And so you have to kind of be ready, for moments like that. So knowing yourself, who you are and your strengths and what you want. So I always say, like, at any given point when you're in a role, you want to know like what would be my next role. Like, even if you're not actively striving for a promotion, like you just want to have the clarity of like, what would I want next, right? Do you want the role that's above you, like the person who's more senior to you and like sort of get stretch projects from your boss? Do you want to, move to some adjacent other team? Do you want to work on different projects, or, even formal internal mobility, like actually migrate to another team? There's so many different ways, and you may just say, oh, there's other projects I want to get involved with. But just having that clarity first and foremost is like step number one. So do a lot of that self-reflection and networking and exploration to figure out what you want, to make it so much easier to then vocalize and document and like go after it. But that's really just, I always start with that. But Tara, if somebody's ready for that higher level promotion, right? Like they're ready, they want something more senior. Where does that process begin? Right? Like we talked about, yes, you have to vocalize it to your manager, but what about like somebody's expectations? Like I always think about a promotion as kind of like a 12-month journey. Like it sort of starts a year in advance, in my opinion. So how do you like think about the finish line, right? So like say you're in June of 2024 and apparently there's going to be a performance review in June of 2025. How do you know like what you're striving towards? Like how do you kind of manage this entire like cycle of getting throughout this entire year of getting where you're trying to go, if you are trying to level up to that higher level role?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's a very common thing. So I am a huge fan of being very, very clear. There's no surprises, right? Pretend that everybody needs to know everything. And when I say everybody, I mean you and your manager and whoever's the decision maker in your promotion. Work with this individual or these individuals and say, hey, I'm thirsty for a promotion. I know we've got these performance reviews coming up. Let's sit down together and write out, I mean, physically write out, document is key, what it takes to get to this role. So, where are you now? What do you need to accomplish? And what does the new success look like? And when it's written out on paper or Google Doc, Google Sheet, whatever it is electronically, um, you can't argue with that, right? Because you're in tune with your manager. You know what you're working toward. You're having regular check ins with your manager, and your manager is therefore seeing your motivation, your excitement for this, but they're also tracking. And at the end of this, what did you say, July of next year, you have completed this, checklist that you and your manager worked together and said, hey, I've completed everything. I'm ready for this promotion. And your manager says, okay, let's go. And they cannot say, oh, by the way, you also didn't do this, you didn't do that. So having a very clear, written down, documented checklist, expectations list in coordination with your manager is critical here.
Yes, I love it. And you're avoiding those surprises. And I think like documentation is so important. Like I always say, literally, you need to get on the same page. But also, when you have that written list, it's a matter of comprehensiveness. Like I love to say to the manager, like, what do you need to see from me? And when you start creating that list, you could say to your manager, what else? Is there anything missing? Make
Yep.
sure everything, like you would say, what do you need to see from me so I can reach the next level? And then you say, what else? Is there anything else? Is this everything? And you literally make sure that 12 months in advance, you're getting everything out on paper. So you've got that checklist, but you agree together that is the full list, right? And then to Tara's point, that way by the end of the year, you're not like, oh, but you didn't do that, right? So you're making sure it's comprehensive, you're making sure it's documented, and then you're making sure over the course of the year that you're checking in, and actually you're going to have to start developing, you're going to have to start actually acting on those goals, because it's a question of like, where's my current performance, where is my current expectations, and are the expectations written out for what a person would do? What are the competencies for the person at the higher level? And then what are my gaps? Right? Each person's going to have different gaps that they have to work on. And then over the course of the year, you're like explicitly going to start developing those things. And then you're going to go to your manager and say, oh, look, you wanted me to work on, communication. Here's what I did. I presented to this team of 50 people globally. You sat in on that presentation. How did that go? And they're either going to say, it was stellar, you did everything, or I want to see you do it again and here's what you need to fix. So it's a journey, right? Because to actually develop your capabilities to reach the next level takes some time and effort. You have to stretch, you have to grow, you have to learn, and you're sort of gaining new traits to become more of a leader. So that's going to take actual effort, and then you need to prove, oh, here's what I did, right? And here's how it went. And right, and it's like, did I actually show you what I'm capable of? Did I actually prove that I have this new competency, that I was able to operate at that senior level? So it's this like fluid process. Every single month you're sort of like developing and then documenting and proving what it is I did, and then getting more feedback to make sure it was enough. And you're like doing that on a monthly basis. And if you talk about that every single month for the course of a year, you want to get to the point where it's like a no-brainer by the time it's performance reviews. And of course you want to understand the timeline, because Tara, you can tell us there's behind the scenes where sometimes these decisions are made, like in a room that you're not in, right? And so you need to
Yeah.
understand the timeline, and that's why you're getting so ahead of it. So Tara, anything else to add of like the stuff we don't see, and like knowing what's happening and like decisions being made about us? Like, how else can we get around that other than like, the explicit, the frequent, the proactive communication, the documentation? Like, what else is there to know about that behind the scenes process of promotions?
Yeah, so much. It depends on the company and kind of the philosophy of how decisions are made, how the leadership operates, but there's politics at play, right? And so you want to make sure you're playing the game to an extent, and you're making yourself known on who you are, what your goals are, what you're doing. And you need to identify for yourself, you need to identify who the decision makers are. Maybe your manager is not going to go to bat for you, right? And you need to figure out how to operate in that environment. You need to figure out who your manager is reporting to potentially, and so you want to start building relationships and networking within your company and within these decision makers. So that way, when that promotion time comes, your name is the first one to come up. Because it is behind the scenes, there's a lot of factors at play. Budget is a huge one. Favoritism comes into play. I mean, we're humans, nothing is perfect. So if your manager happens to be, maybe friends with someone else on your team, they could also get the promotion, and they maybe didn't even want it. Maybe you're working your butt off and they get the promotion. So this is where that extra explicitly clear communication comes into play. And that way, as Rachel said, when the time comes around for that promotion, there's no doubts that you are getting it, you're working for it. And frankly, one thing I wanted to add also, Rachel, is in this whole journey, think of yourself as kind of a marble statue, right? There's little, you got to chip away at it to get this perfect thing at the end. And this is kind of what your journey looks like. And another thing is, you may not actually want a promotion after you start realizing what it might take, or it's a complete role shift. Maybe you're starting to manage people and you realize that's not for you. So it's a very interesting kind of a career development for yourself, just to keep yourself in check, and try to keep an eye on what you actually want, because sometimes it's really easy to get caught up in this. You're running a marathon, right? You're chipping away at this marble statue. You're trying to get to the goal, and pause every once in a while and just make sure it is actually what you really want.
Absolutely. I love that. I mean, that's step one. Like, don't even vie for the promotion if you're not sure whether you want it. And if you're not sure if you want it, do self-reflection, do exploration, do networking, ask questions of yourself, ask questions of other people, but absolutely know what you want as step number one. Talk to other people in those roles, and see if that's something you really want to pursue. But you said so many good things there. I think understanding who your sponsors are and those stakeholders, it may not be just your manager. Who's your manager's manager, or having other advocates around you. Like, I love a good monthly update where you send like a one pager, and you're not just sending that to your manager. You're probably picking 2 to 3 key senior stakeholders that you can synthesize for them your achievements and where you're at. So make it easy for other people to see what you've been up to. And the beauty of that monthly update, by the way, is that you have this one pager, and then over the course of the year, when it comes time for performance reviews, you just send those 12 PDFs. And it's like, look how far this person has come over the course of the year. So just know that it's your job to make it easy for others to help you and to see where you're at and your progress and your achievements and all these great things. And just, yeah, knowing that behind the scenes, knowing the timeline, and asking questions. Like, you can say to your manager, what is the timeline? How do these decisions get made? Because the other thing that Tara mentioned is you're trying to account for fairness. Like, if there are politics at play, if there's someone has a friend, and key relationships are sort of getting in the way, you are protecting that things have to feel as fair as humanly possible, by making yourself front and center and making your impact front and center and letting the results speak for itself. So all of these things are protecting, that you're going to get what you deserve, really, right? Tara, what if like promotions are not in the cards? Like, how do you know if it's like real? Is it possible? Is it an actual opportunity, or am I never going to get promoted? Like, how do you like know that?
That's hard. Again, it depends on the company. I'll take it from the startup lens because in many startups, there's absolutely no structure. So, to even mention the word promotion is almost laughable because we barely even have payroll set up. So there's no structure at all. What I would suggest here is going back to what we talked about at first, which is understanding what your own personal career goals are. And if your career goals are to be in X position in X number of years, then you need to work hard toward that. And maybe your current company isn't the right company for you. And tying in the networking piece, this is where networking comes into play. So maybe you determine that you want a promotion in 5 years to a director level, and your company is not going to get there. And so this is where networking comes in, which is you're talking to folks consistently throughout the year, maybe one or two a week at minimum, to folks in your industry, and you're getting your name out there. We'll talk about this later, but you're building your personal brand, and you are now telling people, hey, I'm working on this. I want a promotion. I'm really, building my own skills. I'm going to these conferences, whatever it might be. And you might be able to switch companies there. And that's kind of a drastic change. But if that's really what you want and that's what you need to get to your end goal, then sometimes it is necessary.
Right. I mean, the difficulty is there are some times where in a company it just may not seem like growth is possible. And so, of course you want to do your very best to grow where you are if you like the organization, but just keep in mind that if you get, wind that, look, maybe there's nowhere else for me to go here, this is where you do always want to think about yourself, not just I'm an employee at this company, but I'm a professional and I'm going to have a network at other companies. I'm going to have relationships at other companies. And I'm going to, make myself sort of have all these different things going on, right? I have, in different memberships, different associations. I've got, just sort of the tentacles out there. And so, again, do your best to see what's possible where you are. But if you start to realize, that maybe people aren't being honest, or maybe people aren't being specific with you, or you'll start to see it, based on kind of what's being given to you or not, and the size and the stage of organization. Sometimes things just feel stuck, and look, even if it's not a title change, I think if you're getting Interesting work, that's great because you're learning and growing, but eventually, you want to be at an organization where within 1, 2, or 3 years, like you feel that they are actively investing in your ability to move up. And if you start to feel stuck or stalled, Tara has a point where sometimes it may just mean I might need, another company that more actively supports that kind of thing, right? So, again, doing your best, understand expectations, be direct of what your goal is, make it explicit. What is the next role for me? Like start talking role title, like get really specific. What role is next for you? And get that plan to get there step by step and estimate a timeline. Like get specific about your timeline and your next steps, and have this all be, part of that conversation. Tara, what if your manager is not great at like giving feedback? In order to like know how to promote yourself or know how to get promoted, you need somebody to be honest with you. Like, how do you make sure you're getting very specific, actionable feedback if your manager may not be good at that?
Yes, this happens all the time. I don't even remember the stat, but most managers are bad managers. So obviously, me in my role, I try to change that. But yeah, most managers have trouble communicating or vouching for their team. So if you're in that situation, so many things you can do, but the main one is, can you switch teams? Can you switch managers? Because you really do, at the end of the day, want someone who's going to go to bat for you and push you and provide the best communication and feedback to you. If you're stuck on your team, if you have your manager, you can't change anything, then I frankly would just have a very uh, blunt conversation with them. And yes, I know some managers, will roll eyes of, oh my gosh, I could never have that conversation with my manager. That's something we could always work on, individually. But I am a huge fan of just laying it out there, be open, be honest, be blunt. And if your manager is not providing you with proper feedback, tell them that. Because
Right.
they may think they're awesome. They may think they're providing you the best feedback. They may not think there's anything wrong. And this is part of companies that have a great culture of transparency and feedback, which is, feedback goes both ways. It's not just a top down setup, it should be bottom up as well. And that should be part of performance reviews if you have them. But you really should have these tough conversations with your leader.
Yeah. And I think also, like, if you start to set goals and you see that they're being vague or something,
Yep.
like, say they're like, oh, you need to be a better communicator. I think it's a matter of knowing, like, like what is a smart goal? So, okay, oh, you want me to be a better communicator? Can you make that more specific? Is it within a team meeting, or is it within presentations, or is it with clients, or can you give me an example of a time when I could have, improved? And can you give me an example of someone who does this really well? And can you actually define on paper what the traits specifically are that you're looking for? Is it, my tone? Is it my, whatever it is, right? Like, so really push, ask follow ups, ask for examples of when you could have improved, ask for examples of the person that is the model citizen on that, and just use those like smart goal, type methodology to make sure that when you're, if they're giving you feedback, that you can sort of tease out exactly what would be an observable, measurable, trait or experience, or how would it look specifically. Like you want to make it so much so that when you set the goal, you're like, would we both know when I achieved it? Like the goal has to be set in such a way that it's like a clear yes or no, this person did this, right? So this is what it is to manage up. You're being specific, you're asking follow-up questions, and you're sort of pushing for the level of clarity that you need. Um,
And this goes
cool.
back to that
Yeah,
documentation, right?
yeah.
If it should not be done verbally, especially if you have a somewhat difficult manager or incompetent manager. This is why you need to be writing things down and checking in on those regularly, getting feedback, make sure the doc is shared with both yourself and the manager and any other key stakeholders. But again, this is why we write things down, exactly why. Write the SMART goals down, write what you've accomplished down, write what your manager's feedback is. And again, when it comes down to that promotion time period, you pull up that doc and you say, hey, Mr. Manager or Miss Manager, everything is completed. That, are we ready to go?
Right.
And there's no argument there.
Right. And I think covering yourself by also meeting with your manager's manager periodically, like it could be
Yeah,
quarterly,
definitely.
but don't just limit yourself to one person. I would say that's another way to protect yourself. Um, Cool. I also like to think about, people I feel who get promoted, sort of go out of their way and not just meet expectations, but like shows that they're influencing their team and their department holistically, right? So you really want to understand what are they looking for, and if they need to see that you're a culture champion, are you influencing how the team hires or how the team does onboarding? Like if that's outside your day-to-day responsibility, I think also just becoming a leader means starting to show that you care about the organization beyond just like your immediate role. So I would, again, you want to understand what are they looking for me to get promoted, but what are the nuances? Like what is every leader doing or paying attention to? And how do I start to show that I have this like wider purview or wider influence, and I'm really looking at how this organization operates and not just like checking the box of, what they need to see from me. So, what else is the leader doing that I could start doing to be seen that way, right? You want to start operating at the level above you, and like essentially you become like you operate at that level probably before you actually formally earn the title. So that's what you got to figure out is like, how do I start operating as the director, or how do I start showing up as the VP, or whatever it is, right? Like what else are those people doing that you can start to do?
This is where stretch goals come into play. So if you're looking upward, you want to see what is the leadership team involved with? Are there any projects, small or large, that you can start getting involved with? A, to let them know who you are, and B, to show them what you can do. And again, this could be anything. This could just be taking notes in a meeting at the very minimum. If the executive team or your manager, boss's boss is in a meeting, how can you start getting involved in there? And it gradually builds over time where you start establishing yourself as a key player in these meetings or in these other projects. So I would recommend taking additional things on that are outside of your current scope. And it also could be other areas of the company. Say, again, I'm in the HR world. Say I'm in HR, but I really want to start getting involved in a different area just to stretch myself, to push myself. And so maybe I'll go volunteer, something on the technical team. Is there a project or something I can take on there? And there's usually a lot of stuff in a small business. There's a lot of people who do a lot of different things, not just startups, but in any sort of small business. So what can you take on? Maybe you want to help the marketing team. Maybe there's an email campaign that you feel strongly about. So what can you start pushing yourself to take on?
Yeah, absolutely. At least one stretch project probably at any given time. And the stretch
Correct.
project, like you got to propose that or brainstorm what that is with your manager and like get the okay, get them to like brainstorm with you. What can you take on that's new and different that you haven't already done yet? What would be new for you? Who can pull you up or shadow you or mentor you on that shadow project or that stretch project, and what would be the right stretch project for you? But like, it's not going to just come to you. You want to start brainstorming explicitly with your manager, what else can I take on, or getting involved with like affinity networks. I was involved with like the women's network. That's a great way to also be cross functional and meet other people across the organization. But your stretch projects ideally are directly related to your goal so that you're spending time in ways that get you closer to where you want to go. But brainstorm and have at least one stretch project at any given time. And this actually relates to, internal mobility, right? So if somebody does want to formally move to another team, Tara, I feel like there's a lot of different ways that organizations handle that. But how have you seen the different methods around internal mobility happen?
Yes, Rachel, I'm going to pause you for 1 second because for anyone listening who wants a little bit more detail on what we just talked about with stretch goals and taking on other responsibilities, there's a really good book. It's called Power by Jeffrey Pfeffer. And I do recommend it because they do talk in that book about taking on additional responsibilities, adding power, making yourself known in organizations. So if you want to read a little bit more on that, I do recommend that book. I just finished it a couple weeks ago, so it's still fresh in my head.
Nice.
But I found it really helpful, actually. So there's some
Amazing.
really good examples in there.
Good. Wonderful. Yeah, internal mobility. Tell me, right? Somebody is ready to move
Yeah.
to the next team. They want to go to another function. Like, I've seen this go in different ways, right? I've seen it either be like very formal, where, this company requires like kind of several months in advance. You've got to get the head count approved. You've got to get the budget approved. You've got to have like your manager involved and all these types of things. I've also seen very informally where like you start shadowing, you start getting involved, and then all of a sudden you take on more, things of that other team. And then before you know it, you're sort of just, spending 50% of your week helping that team. So like sort of slowly getting involved. What else have you noticed from like internal mobility that you think can help people if they did want to migrate to another team?
Yeah, getting your name out there, start getting involved, take on those stretch projects. It highly depends on the company size and structure and how the company handles kind of a lateral promotion, if you will. And again, I would start if you want to move to another team, who's leading those teams? What are their managers? Get to know the managers. It's very helpful. And yeah, I would say building relationships is the key part here, and then start getting involved. So this is not going to be in a more of an informal setting or even like a mid-formal. It's not going to be just a light switch. You're one day on this team, the next day on the other team. It's going to be a gradual thing, and especially in companies with less structure, and maybe they don't have any sort of process around this. So you can actually pave the way yourself, and really just get involved. That's the biggest thing, is get your name out
Right.
there.
And you could start
Get,
by shadowing. You could say, I'd
yeah,
love to sit in on this meeting. It's really interesting to me. But like, you could also just set up a one on one networking meeting. Like, what do you do? I'd love to learn more about your day to day. Could be shadowing, could be networking, and then eventually assistance and support. But just being willing to essentially network internally to learn what these other teams are up to, and see where that goes. But also just understanding how your firm handles it. If it is a formal process, just get to know what that process is. It takes a little bit of vulnerability sometimes if you're feeling ready to say it to your manager. That's sometimes a nerve-wracking thing to start a conversation around. But if you have a mentor at the organization, that's another way to say, how can I understand how things work without having to voice it to my manager? So see like if there's another senior person who can be a mentor to you that you can build trust with over the course of time, and you can have these types of conversations with. Cool. Tara, anything else just about internally dealing with growth at current organization that we haven't touched on yet?
yeah. I want to also mention, and this might be obvious, but sometimes it's a good reminder that the grass is not always greener on the other side. So make sure you understand your why for moving teams, and that you have a clear idea of what your goals are. So, you need to prove yourself, right? And that's, so you need to highlight your value. You need to prove yourself. Why does this other team want to bring you into their circle? And start understanding, talk with the other folks, maybe at your level, at different levels in the team itself, and just see if it really is um, the right place for you, because it may sound great, and then you start talking and you realize your team is just fine, right? So understand why you would want to move laterally or internally, and just use that as your baseline.
Yes, I think that's so important. I mean, you may have interviews internally, and so they're going to ask you those questions too. So, absolutely doing the self-reflection and the exploration up front to understand what you're interested in, where you want to go, and then it's going to become a lot more clear to how to advocate for yourself and how to get yourself where you want to go. Um, if we were to just start thinking about, your place in an organization, that's one thing, right? But if we want to think about yourself as a professional, where you're not just only thinking about, oh, I'm the employee at this org, but you know what? I'm a professional, right? What else should somebody be thinking about in just their career at large, right? One of those big topics is upskilling, right? There's this like lifelong learning. We're all taking courses, we're all getting certified, we're all growing, right? It's like not enough anymore just to go to undergrad and that's it, right? So how can somebody think about what is the best next thing to do? Training, it could be a boot camp, it could be a certification. How do you think about like somebody's ability to kind of prioritize their next upskilling efforts, and yeah, like what skill development opportunities they should be thinking about?
Yeah, this is critical because it doesn't matter what size company you're in, it doesn't matter where you work or what industry you're in, you can always improve yourself personally and professionally. And this is one of my favorite topics, which is upskilling. But I would first start with anything that your company has that's in existence. So, does your manager or does your team have any sort of budget for taking courses? Maybe they even offer like a Udemy, login that you can just use. And so I would make sure that you can take any stipends, any budget, any L&D tools, and utilize them, take advantage of them, right? And so take as many courses as you can within that realm. And kind of the next thing is taking specific courses, certifications, boot camps. Are there any other projects that you can take on that are, either within the company, or if you're allowed to freelance it outside your company, and really push yourself that way? The biggest thing, I think, this is all working toward your own end goals. So make sure you're taking on projects and learning things. You want to be as efficient as you can with your time. There's so many resources out there, and even LinkedIn learning courses. There's just so much. So make sure you're being very, very goal driven and specific on, okay, if I take this class, if I spend maybe my own money on a specific certification, is this going to actually help my career? And yes, I understand we all have very different interests and may want to explore a certain area, and that's great. But if you are trying to upskill, be very, very strategic with it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Like some some growth goals will require something very, very formal certification wise, and some may not. So, like, where are you looking to go and talk to those people, whether it's your manager or some other type of person, whoever is your target role or whatever your goal is, and just really getting deep in terms of what upskilling is most reputable, most worthwhile based on what hiring managers actually value or what your manager values, or what's going to move the needle. And, look, partially upskilling is what's interesting to you and how do you learn best, but partially it's what is worth your time and money. And of course, AI is the name of the game. I mean, AI is affecting every single person's job. So if you haven't already hopped on the bandwagon, just challenge yourself, like learn something new, even if it's like difficult and weird and uncomfortable and it's maybe scary to you or maybe it feels really technical. Just opening up ChatGPT and starting to try it, but really, you could pave the way. Like AI sort of came really fast for a lot of us, but talk to your manager about how are we as a team getting up to speed? Like, can you sort of build in the learning to your day-to-day job? Like if you can be paid to sort of learn these new advancements and new tools, great. But you want to stay ahead of the curve because things are changing fast with technology. So you want to make sure you're ahead of that and you're knowing what's changing. How can I be involved? What AI should we use or not use? And just getting ahead of, it's not just thinking about you and your skill set. It's thinking about the industry and the trends and the developments. And are you aware of what's out there and what's going on? Are you, feeling like a knowledgeable sort of industry professional? Things are moving really fast, so it's not always easy to do. But it's absolutely something that should be, something at least once a quarter. You're asking yourself, what's the next skill I could or should learn, and what's important. The next sort of bucket is your branding, right?
Well,
So
Rachel,
there's,
let me pause
yeah,
you for one
go ahead.
second before we switch to branding. So this whole topic of upskilling, I want to just note, maybe your company doesn't have this. Maybe it doesn't exist on any sort of L&D tools, budgets, whatever. This sounds like a really great stretch project for me. If you want to take this on and approach your manager or the leadership team and say, hey, I really think that we can get a positive ROI, return on investment, for providing these services or dollar amount, whatever it might be, to our employees. Let me come up with a budget. Let me do a proposal for you. I'll take the lead on this. And A, it's great because you're showing your leadership skills, you're upskilling, and you're working outside your current scope. But B, you also can actually take advantage of the actual programs that you're about to build. So this is just one idea. Again, most companies have something, but if it doesn't, I would strongly consider maybe taking this on as a stretch goal for yourself.
Absolutely, right. Upskilling, that's the beauty. It's like, what do you want or need to learn? And like, can you work that into your everyday,
Yeah.
job and being, paid to learn essentially, is a great way to do it. Make a business case, make a proposal. I love it. Um, the other piece I like to think about proactively is branding, right? So whether it's your LinkedIn, whether it's your resume, kind of thinking about how you can get ahead, because once you're in job search, it's really hard to like find all the time to do all the different things. But like, if you wanted to create a video pitch for yourself, if you wanted to create a personal website, a blog, start writing your thought leadership, and getting your voice out there, getting active. Of course, just making sure your resume is updated, being active on LinkedIn. You don't have to do this kind of stuff like every day, but I think when you're not job searching, doing some of this ahead of time can feel a little more doable and more fun and more interesting, because you get to just be more authentic. Whereas with job search more formally, sometimes you feel like you have to do it and you're in crunch time and you're stressed. But when you're sort of not actively searching, you can really ask yourself, like, how can I represent myself as a professional in some new and different ways, and how do I use my time wisely now, to maybe build out some branding that I had never built out before. And Tara, I know you were writing your first blog, and I know that was a fun experience for you, but thoughts on, what branding you think might be, worth somebody's time. But also, Tara, like with your recruiter hat on, like when you see a candidate who has like a website, or like, their LinkedIn's really like, well fleshed out, like, this is the type of stuff that looks good. But when you think about it in hindsight, it's like this stuff takes time for people to flesh out. So what do you think is really worth it for someone to focus on, with their branding?
Yeah, and I just wrapped this up myself. I've been working on this for the past couple of months personally. So this is a hot topic for me. But the main thing to remember is that your LinkedIn profile, your resume, it's just text. It's just a picture. No one knows who you are. So how do you differentiate yourself? And that's kind of what was my driver is I don't want to just have text on a page. I want people to look at my information or my LinkedIn and go, "Oh wow, she really cares about this." Or she's very involved in XYZ. And ideally, you should have your LinkedIn set up so that if somebody clicks on your profile within 10 seconds at most, they already know what you stand for, what you believe in, and uh, and that just differentiates yourself. The whole point is to differentiate yourself. Who are you as text on a page?
Mm,
So with LinkedIn, you can do basic things. I'm personally a grammar nerd. My a pet peeve of mine is make sure everything is spelled properly on your page because people notice, and especially from my recruiting days, it's very noticeable. And if I see a lot of typos or just minor issues on a LinkedIn page or a resume, it makes me think, does this person actually have attention to detail? Or are they really going to care about my company as much as I care about my company?
mm.
So go back to basics. Go have a friend or coworker proofread your stuff. Rachel, you're very good at this too, so a little plug for you as well and your services. It's wonderful, but just go back to basics. Make sure that you have a really clear message of who you are, and we'll get to that in a second because there's ways to do that. But B is just make sure it's clean, make sure there's no typos, have a nice clear picture if you choose to have a picture on LinkedIn. Not necessary on a resume at this point, but just keep it cohesive, keep it efficient. Don't use the extra words. Just get to the point.
Right.
And basically just talk about, yeah, who are you? What's the substance behind this name that I see? Because I don't know who you are. How can you pitch it to me in seconds? So super important. A couple of the ways to do that on LinkedIn is link to a personal website, a portfolio. Maybe you're in marketing and you have worked on a couple website designs. Maybe you have some things that you're really proud of. Show them off. This is where you do kind of that humble brag. This is the exciting part. Show off your skills. What have you done?
Right. And I
Now,
think that these
go ahead.
days you can even have a portfolio. Like, I think it used to be like designers or like marketing or like certain people would have a portfolio. Now it's like any type of job, you can have a portfolio. It's just a more visual way to represent past project stories and examples beyond a resume, which is a list of bullets. So, like, take the time to get creative. And a portfolio doesn't even have to be like a website, it could be a few slides that you turn into a PDF. But to represent your past experience in a different format that someone can digest quickly. Like, these are the things you may not have the time or mind space to do when you're in job search, but starting to think about creative ways to showcase who you are when you have the time on your hands. Or even just writing a blog is amazing, because after an interview, to be able to send a blog where you're like, here's an additional way to expand upon my thoughts, because interviews, it's a quick conversation, but like, you say you wrote 5 blogs over the course of however many months or even years, but they're always going to live there. And if it represents your thoughts, it's a great way to portray, like, you may or may not be the best communicator in an interview, but to add, here's who I am and here's what I've done in other formats, these are proactive things that can help you later on.
Yeah, you're basically pre-qualifying yourself, especially from the talent lens when I would interview folks or even just do a resume screen where I have 100 resumes and I got to pick 3 people, right?
Right.
To go to the next round. I'm going to look for people who have really put effort into telling me who they are
Yeah.
and what they believe in and what they stand for. And that separates you.
And if you're not sure, like to Tara's point, like get a friend or a mentor or a peer or a coach to have another pairs of eyes and ears on it, because I know, sometimes the branding can be very stressful to people. So just having another person there can really help so much, because otherwise, there's so many ways on a resume to say the same thing in different ways, but if you're spinning in circles, just get support with it. Like, don't drive yourself nuts. I mean, you just need a fresh pair of eyes to say, oh, this makes sense, this sounds good, this looks good, this doesn't make sense. Sometimes we just cannot judge our own materials sometimes. um
Absolutely. And another thing is if you ask yourself, what do I stand for? And you don't know, and you come back with, I like this, I like that, I care about everything. Go down and actually start writing. My mission is to, and
mm,
see what comes out of your head.
right.
What is the number one thing? And I did that myself. My mission is to build and establish scalable people functions, but I also want to build trust with founders, employees, and investors. And that I wrote that down, I tweaked a little bit over time, and I went, wow, that captures me. That's
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
And I felt so good about it. And I was
I
able to
love that.
build my
I
LinkedIn
always
off of
say
that.
it's like a forcing mechanism, because if you only
Hmm.
have one sentence and you draft it, you're going to come back to it and you're going to say, how do I find the 10 words that like best represent what I'm trying to say? So it is an exercise. It will push you to find the clarity by just figuring out what are the best words to use. It becomes a sometimes an easier tool than just like having the deep questions that you ask of yourself of like, where do I belong in this world? But like when you start writing it, it pushes you to figure out like, if I have such a limited space to say it, what is the best possible words I can use that make my mission as clear as humanly possible, because it's a limited space. So it does push you to figure it out.
Yeah, and this is so hard, especially when you're in a role that is very flexible. A perfect example is my previous startup. I was head of people, but I also did so many things. I had, if you counted, it was probably 7 different jobs, right, that I was doing. And so when I went to write my mission, I said, oh gosh, I really like recruiting, but I also really like operations, but I also like this. I like legal, I like compliance. So for me, it was a really, frankly, painful exercise to come down to, no, this is who I am. This is what I really feel passionate about, and this is the area of expertise that I have. And so it was definitely a forcing function.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And by the way, if anyone has questions, please do raise your hand. I didn't see any hands. And I'll monitor my DMs as well. Um, we've talked about a lot of different things here. I mean, networking is so important. We've alluded to it. I would say if you're not job searching, I would say at least once a month, trying to meet one person at a different company or one person in a target role, bare minimum proactively, that would be great. You want to build relationships before you need them so that they are authentic, because eventually you might need something, they might need something, and it's always a give and take, and it is a relationship. But ideally, you're getting to know lots of different people, just over the course of your life, over the course of your year. Um, and just researching, staying in the know with different industry trends, building those relationships. We've touched on a lot, but I think this is a very holistic way to think about, kind of what you could do in the course of the year to help yourself grow, even if you're not job searching, right? And I always say, like, knowing your next step in your direction is so important, because in order to figure out your upskilling, in order to figure out who to network with, in order to figure out what to ask for and how to promote yourself internally, you got to know where it is you want to go. So just make sure you spend the time on that, because it's okay to be in a phase of like, what would I want next? What skills do I want to learn, or what role do I want next, or what industry do I want to get involved with? And that way the rest of your efforts are directional, right? Because otherwise we're just leaving it to chance of who we meet and what our boss asks us to do, right? So knowing your direction so you can be as intentional as possible with all of these efforts, right? You don't want to just network to check the box. You don't want to just upskill to check the box. It's like, where am I going, right? And how can these efforts actually move me closer to where I'm going?
Yeah, you're frankly playing a chess game with your own career. What's the most strategic or efficient way to get to your goals, to the
Yes.
end, what's the end goal look like? And yeah, it can change 50 times. My personal goals have changed so many times, but it's great to start learning and evolving my own career, my own skills, and then you start to really just build off of that and you become this very powerful, confident person. And one thing I want to mention is it's really easy to get caught up in building and running and just doing this marathon of life that we're all on. But take purposeful time to reflect and look back on what you have built. It's very easy to feel like you're never good enough, you'll never get there. There's just so much to do. But take that moment, maybe set a calendar reminder once a month or once a quarter and just pause and say, wow, look at what I've done. I'm really proud of myself. And make sure that you just take that time, maybe even write it down. I have a little checklist of things that I've completed that I'm proud of. And if I ever need to, I just look at that and I think, wow, there's a lot here. I'm really proud of myself. And that's kind of that pause moment, just that quick reflection before you start the next push. Like, let's get back on this trail. Let's start running even harder and get to our goals.
Yeah, it's an agenda that you can have for yourself where you're absolutely documenting and celebrating the wins. And it's that quarterly, have I done some upskilling? Have I done some networking, right? You're running through the important factors and making the time to do it. It's so important. So I hope this was a helpful sort of holistic reminder of all the different things you can think about with your career. um, and please do connect with me on LinkedIn. You can find our company on most social media accounts at Get Woken or at Woken. And our website is iamwoken.com. We always offer a free initial chat. So if you want to chat about your career, please do reach out. And we'll be back on Fishbowl for more. And Tara, where can people find and get in touch with you?
If you look up my name on LinkedIn, I'm right there. I have a bit of an unusual last name, so I'm Tara Shapowal on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with me and let's chat. If you have more specific questions, obviously Rachel is always here with her company and her career platform, but I'm also happy to answer questions too. And I'm a human being just like you, and I've been through struggles. I know what it's like to be job hunting, to try to get those promotions. So yeah, let me know how I can help you.
Amazing. I hope this was helpful, everybody. We will be back for more. Please do connect, and we're here for you. We're here for all the things. We know the workplace can be weird and difficult and messy and stressful, but it can also be a beautiful, crazy ride. So get support through it so that you can win out, whatever that means for you, achieving your goals. We're here for you, and hopefully, we'll
Yes.
see you soon.
Thanks so much, Rachel. It really is an exciting thing. It's a lot of work, but it is very exciting and rewarding. So thanks, everybody. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, we'll talk soon. Bye, guys.